Okay, so we've got the BCA report to look at, but it's a good chance to just quickly go over the DCP and LEP requirements with Michelle. Again, I'll give her credit; she's done all the hard work here and put all these together for you, or given it to me, which means my workload's a lot easier. And you should already be familiar with these things. I've given you all of the planning documents, but it's good to see here everything summarised nicely, and it shows you also how you can get these documents from the council website. So if you haven't already tried that, it's a good thing to look at. And we can see the important controls, but I'll go pretty quickly through this because you should already know this. And get on to the relevant controls for terraces. And so there is a story limit. So hopefully you'll remember that. There's a 2-story limit as well as the 9-metre limit. And that's going to have an effect, but we've also got to look at then the BCA and the way it looks at stories, which is a bit different. In this area, so that's all in those planning documents I gave you earlier. There's a map with the number of stories allowed in each area. Yeah, so that's 2 stories in the location you've got. And then again, the FSR, which hopefully you're all well and truly across, having just done your SEE. And that gives you the calculation. So again, we should know all of these things. And we'll skip through that. Acid sulfate soils we'll maybe come back to, but we'd assume that there would be issues here with this soil, and you'd need to get the engineer to give you some advice there as well. And heritage is always something to think about. It's definitely part of the conservation zone, and that would affect the design, but again, we're past that stage. And the height, again, we know needs to be 9 metres, so we will need to adjust the roof to get under that control, and that's okay. And then the number of car parks, and also the bicycle requirements is something we need to look at. So we've got the right number of car parks, but you'll also need to look at the requirement for bicycles, or I think they can also be for motorbikes. And I don't remember if it's here, so I just went through this quickly before, but you'll see there is a requirement for that. And then the, again, we've looked at the building heights, 2 stories the limit, as well as the 9 metres, of course. And the setbacks, again, we're past that stage, but again, just to quickly go over that. And also solar access, all of these things we're really past. So then you've got landscaping, which again, you should, I'm sure, all have addressed in design, but there's some good maybe extra information here about the ability to use semi-porous paving, which can be included in your deep soil planning area if you use certain products, but generally it's not. But again, if it's that semi-porous stuff, you can. And that's where the 15% requirement comes from. And again, the requirements for open space, which again, you should have definitely covered in your design drawings. So yeah, fences, actually that's something I'll point out, because I'm not sure if everyone looked at that. Did I tell you about the limit for the front fence, mostly, the height limit? With at least, yeah, so you know it's 900 mil unless it's semi-transparent, and then you can go to 1.5. Yeah? Yeah. So if you read it there, that is definitely control. So, yeah. So if it's solid, 900 mil, that's a pretty standard control actually. And again, if you have openings though, and make it partially transparent, you can go up to potentially 1.5, but it's either 1.2 in some situations. So you might need to check your fence and make sure it fits within that. And then, yeah, here we are, bicycles. So you will need space for a bike. You've got so much room in that garage, that shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, yeah. So that's fine. And Yeah, motorcycle as well, so you can include maybe space for a motorcycle. Then accessible car spaces, we'll come back to that when we look at adaptable dwellings. And the waste management plan, you'll need to develop further, so having done a report-based or report format waste management plan, you'll still need to do a plan, like a drawing, basically a floor plan of the site, or sorry, yeah, a site plan that shows areas like the washdown areas, areas for storage of materials for reuse and recycling, how you're going to secure the site for sediment control, so soil and water runoff, and there are some pretty standard methods you can use to do that, and so that all needs to be shown on that drawing, which can actually be lodged with the CC. That's quite standard. That can be done then, and so that's when we'll do that. And again, so that again has to be a drawing, which goes with the report that you've done, and then past all the waste things in, and then you've got the requirements for adaptable housing. So you can see if you read this document, and I've actually given you the full document. This is just an excerpt from it. The document is the Sydney City Council DCP for access, which has all of the controls for adaptable housing for Sydney City Council. There's also a standard, which is AS 4299, and so you'll see there if you read it that it wouldn't actually be required for a development this size. It's only required when you have 10 or more dwellings. So you of course only have 3, so it definitely would not be required, but it is required for the subjects you're doing, that you look at adaptable housing. So, but it is adaptable. Remember, you don't need to make it accessible. So, in other words, one of your units needs to have the option to be adapted to make it accessible. And what we're just discussing is how you can make it accessible if you've got steps at the entry, because if you ever need to do an accessible dwelling, and I've done quite a few. No, that's what I'm trying to avoid. No, I'll tell you how to do it. So, okay, so I've designed quite a few accessible dwellings. They're actually quite, if you read this document, it'll tell you that they should only add 5% to the cost, and sometimes they won't add anything, and it's a lovely world of trails and everything, and everything's happy. But the reality is they do add a lot to the cost. They're much larger than a normal dwelling, and it's not a simple thing. Yeah. So the only way I've ever made them work is by putting them on the ground floor at the height, essentially, of the ground, which is what Michelle's done in her class. She's changed their design so that their entries are all at the ground level. Now, it's too late to change yours. I'm not going to make you do that. That would be ridiculous. But, so the only option we thought... Hey, sorry? Yeah, well, that'd be nice. So, but we can just make sure there's space for a lift. And we'll say that meets the requirement. I think technically it might not even work, but because really you should have the outdoor space accessible as well. Right, the outdoor space for the resident, if they need accessibility, then they should be able to access their own outdoor space.
Well, on the northern side of the building, that's cut out.
Yeah, the back you can access, but not the front. Yeah. 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 You could access that part, but you couldn't access your own front yard. So that wouldn't cut it, to be honest. But we'll have to go with it because that's the only way. Otherwise, you'd have to redesign the whole thing. Yeah, the pathway, we worked it out. It'd have to be 21 metres long to have a ramp. And it would take up that whole front yard, would just be all ramp. It's the only way to do it. So we can say that's another possibility. There is room for it. It just would be, you know, a ramp the size we have outside most commercial buildings. Well, again, you don't need to make it accessible. You just need to make it so that it's possible for it to be adapted to make it accessible. Right? So, and really the purpose... That's right, it is. That's it. So it's technically possible, and that's what we're trying to achieve. It's just so that you can cover, as part of the subjects, the requirements for adaptable dwellings. But again, you don't need to make it accessible. And really, it's just to demonstrate that you've had a look at these requirements. So make sure you have a look at that file as well. I'll just show you where it is. So in the week 8 folder. That's right, yeah. And that's probably what could have been done last semester, but I wasn't here, so I can't control that. So, yeah. So, okay, and so I don't think it was ever maybe made clear that it was? Okay, well, I don't know. Yeah. I can't comment, but I work with the people who did that, but so I can't really say too much. But yeah, if you haven't done them on a regular basis, it's not the simplest thing to get right the first time. I know when these controls started coming in, we spent a long time working on it. But anyhow, this is a document. If you want to have a look at it, it's there for you to read. So it's called, again, Access to June 2004 in the week 8 folder under Capital Documents. And I've also given you the landscape code, because that was one that wasn't given to you before. Again, just some light reading for you. Don't expect you to read the whole thing, but you should at least skim through it. It's 77 pages, but skim through it and see if you can find the parts that are relevant. So, you need to think about adaptable housing, but I'm not going to be too strict with that, and we'll just try and get a solution that works with a minimum of work for you. And then we can get on to what we really want to be looking at, which is the BCA. So, and this is where Michelle's done, again, all this great work. I've got to keep giving her credit because it's saved me a heap of time. In detail, yeah. Right. Oh, is it? But you must have done volume 2. Yeah, you must have. Yeah. 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 No, well, that's good because this has got a lot of it summarised, the important things. And it does take a few goes to go through and get used to the process and understand which clauses are really going to affect you a lot. And so, yeah, so here this is really well set out. And so one of the primary things you need to look at is your fire safety and the resistance, which you have in these measures, structural integrity and insulation, and that's what those values mean. You'll see when they come up in a moment. And one of the things that really gets me with this is when people talk about fire-rated windows and think they can just solve all their problems by specifying this thing called a fire-rated window. The reality is there's no such thing, because they can't have the structural or the insulation requirements. What's called a fire-rated window will only have the integrity, that middle one, and they can't ever meet those structural or insulation requirements. So if you have an opening or a window that needs to achieve a fire rating, it generally needs to be sprinkled, and that's something we don't want to do. So I'll have a look at that. But yeah, it's good just to keep an eye, or just have an idea of what those FRL values mean, and then they'll come up in a minute. Climate zone is something to look at. It's a new thing in the BCA, and well, it's not new that they've updated this. And so, again, this tells you the climate zone we're in, and I'll make sure you've got a copy of this map. I didn't actually give you this, but Michelle's given her class the high quality version of that map, which you can see all the suburbs on, and it's in, I thought it was in here somewhere, but yeah, I'll try and get you a copy of that. Because you see there, that's the one in the BCA, and it's very small. When you look at the Sydney region, there are lots of zones in there. Sydney's actually cut through the middle between, 5 and 6. I sometimes wonder though if it's all that important, because there aren't too many controls in the BCA that will refer to that climate zone. The more important thing, of course, is the building classification. So here you can see, and this is where hopefully it should start to become a lot clearer, just to confirm your building classification. Yeah, that's right, Class 2. Class 2 is the important one though. Class 7 is the car park, yeah, or the garage, yeah. And we'll get onto that. So it's going to be a private garage, which is nice, makes it easier. But again, the important thing is the class 2. Technically, it could be class 1. It wouldn't need to be that different, and you could make it class 1. And you could have the car park as class 10. And we've actually had a building assessor write a report that shows exactly how you can do that. But it'll be simpler for you if you keep it as class 2 and class 7, and then base all your requirements on that. And that means you're looking at volume 1, I mean, not volume 2. Of course, so if it was class 1 and class 10, then you'd be looking at volume 2. Sorry? That's right, volume 1, that's it. Okay, so we have multiple classification, and you can see there's just a bit of an explanation of when that applies. It's more than 10%, so we definitely need to treat it as 2 classifications. And then here, this is a really important thing that Michelle worked out, and I didn't know this one. I know that with class 10, you can have a garage with 3 vehicles or less, but this shows you that you can have a private garage as a class 7, but it's still, yeah, again, if it's got less than 3 car parks, which is what 3 or less, so then the controls aren't as strict essentially. And what it really means is that the fire rating for the units above, which are class 2, can come from the car park. And you'll see that'll come into it in a moment. And really what it's all about is trying to get the lowest type of construction, or the least fire resisting that we can, because that's the cheapest and the easiest to build. Right, so you can see here, this is actually probably the first table you should look at after you've worked out the classification, and then you want to know what type of construction is required. You can see that if it's got a rise in stories of 1, then it can always be class C, pretty much. But then if you've got 2 or more, and it's class 2, then it's sometimes required to be class B, according to this table. So you might be thinking, it's got to be B. Or is that anything you looked at this yet, or decided, yeah, which class you're going to be going for? So you might have thought B, because unless you know the next thing, that's what the table says quite clearly, type B. If it's class 5, 6 or 7, of course then it can still be C, but if it's class 2, 3, 9, rising of stories, and we'll get to the rising stories in a second as well, then yeah, type B, but don't write that down yet, because we've got, with all of these things, there are exemptions or you know, amendments and variations to that control, and we'll get onto that. So, so this is getting into the way you determine the rising stories, and we'll go past this because it's there's a bit of detail there, but we can just go on to the section where it's got the way that you can then determine if a story is counted. And really what it comes down to is if the average over a 12 metre length is less than a metre. And yours is, easily. The highest point is about a metre above the ground. If it's more than that, we can change the ground level or adjust the building height a little bit if we have to. But it's about a metre at the entry from the ground, and so the average height, and I'll just show you what I mean. So in this section, okay, so from the entry here, which is really the outside of the building, from there down to the ground, you can see there that's 9, or almost exactly 1,000, depending on where I click, but about 900 something, or there 1,008. So the average, if we project that ground line through to the back, is definitely less than a metre over that 12 metres, so we don't really need to worry about doing the complex calculations that you sometimes have to do. You can see here on the next page. If you want to give that a go, it's actually a good way, a good little formula you can use pretty easily. But again, in this case, we can definitely just say that it's not counted. So that means we're only counting the 2 stories above the car park. So it's got a rise in stories of 2. And again, just some more diagrams on how you can work that out. This one's pretty close. That's probably what could have been done if we wanted to get the adaptable dwelling to work as well. Would have made this much simpler. But again, this is just a reminder about that. So, so again, the DCP only allows 2 stories anyway. Okay, and this is the bit that's essentially going to get us out of trouble, or means that we can do type C. And this is why you've always got to read through all of these clauses and not just stop at one. You've got to go right through the whole document. You can see there it says quite clearly, if the building has a rising story of 2, it can be type C construction if it's class 2 and each unit has either 2 exits, which you actually have, or, more importantly, its own direct access to open space. And you have that. And that's a good thing to remember. So it means that if you're doing terraces in the future, they're generally going to have their own street access, and they generally can be class C, or type C, sorry. As long as they're 2-story. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Generally, yeah. There is a definition of open space in the BCA. Yeah, yeah. Basically, no. It has to be on the ground. Yep. Open space. And there are always exemptions, and so there are situations where open space can be counted as or accessible from undercover areas. So have a look at the definition, it explains all of that. But in this case, that front door definitely leads to open space. So again, car parks, this is where that concession, talking about the private garages, the fact that it can be a private garage means that we can use the car park to achieve the fire rating that we need for class 2. And so again, this just explains that a bit more. And so probably the important thing there is that you don't need to have, or there's no requirement for non-combustible materials with type C. So in other words, you can have timber and other combustible materials. It doesn't need to be masonry or any other normally non-combustible material, which is a great thing. It opens up a lot of options for construction and should simplify that quite a lot. But you still need to have fire separation between the units, and then probably more importantly now, the noise separation is the one that's going to determine your party walls and the construction for those. But you always start with fire separation, and then you can look at the FRLs that are required, and that's in the specification, section C. And so this is something that's easier to miss actually, because when you look at the BCA, we'll just open it up. Here it is. Oh, that's volume 2. Close that. So I've got volume 1 as well. Alright, so when you're going through this use document, it's nice that you've got all these contents on the left. You can quickly go to different sections, and as you get more familiar with it, you can usually go quickly to the part you need just by navigating over there. But if you go to section C, you'll see that the specifications is just one big section. So you need to remember that when you expand that, have a look at the parts where they cover what's required for, if you scroll down, I always have to scroll through this. So that shows what's required for each type of construction. So you've got type A construction there, and then the next table will be, oh well again this is just to continue type A, and then you've got the requirements for type B construction. And again there'll be another table there with all the FRLs, and then finally after the second table for all those car parks, then you've got the requirements for type C construction. So it's all buried in that specification. And that's an easy one to miss. So you can see here that's where this table's come from. So there you can see we finally got these FRLs, and you get something specific that tell you what the construction requirements are for those external walls. So, internal walls essentially don't matter unless they're these ones here that are bounding public spaces and things like that. But again, normally they won't be affected, and it's mostly the external walls and the party walls, the common walls. So we'll have a look at how you can achieve those fire ratings in a second, but that's what you need to look at. So you need to be totally across what the fire rating or the FRL requirements are for those walls and columns and the other structural elements, roofs and ceilings in some cases will need a fire rating, not for type C though, so that makes it easy for you. And okay, so that's about it for section C. So when you're doing your report, that's really as far as you need to go. With section C, you need to know what the FRLs are, and then you can really go to section D. But I might just quickly go over to one of the other documents that I've given you. Back in the week 7 folder, there's a PowerPoint file which is on fire separation and acoustic separation. And so this actually covers a lot of similar things, but it's more abstract. It's not necessarily based on your particular development. But there it does have, if you go further, beyond all these tables, it's got some examples of different construction types. We go down here, and they've just got the R values, but these are the sorts of walls that you would have to also achieve those FRL values. We'll come back to what these R values are used for in a minute, but do you know any other places you can get examples of types of wall construction that are going to achieve a certain FRL?
Yes.
Yeah? Maybe there's a simpler way. What about the manufacturer's specifications? So BOL, CSR, all the people who make these building products, they have their own specifications where they will tell you what these different wall types are going to achieve and what FRL they're going to achieve. So that's where you need to look. So BOL and CSR and Hardy's as well, they're the main manufacturers. And so you can look up, a certain type of brick, or Hebel is another one that will achieve the FRL along with either timber frame or masonry, whatever sort of construction you're looking at. Okay, so you need to be able to look up those FRL values. And again, manufacturer specifications are the best way. So I'll leave this open, I'll come back to that. And so again, that's still looking at section C. And again, you've got to be able to check those FRLs, make sure they comply. But with type C, it's pretty easy. So then you need to look at section D, which has the requirements for fire safety or for access and egress, essentially. And so probably the most important thing is to look at the number of exits required. You should only need the one from the basement. Even though it says they're not less than 2, if you read through, you'll see there's an exemption, and it definitely is just 1 from that level. And but again, this is where you should start to look at the number of exits. Again, with class 2, because you've got a direct access to open space, you only need the 1 exit from those each dwelling as well. Again, make sure you read through this and understand why that's the case. We've had a look at the effective height and the way you calculate the number of stories, but again, that comes in in volume, also in section D as well. See in a minute. And so here, so this is looking at the travel distances, so you need to check that in the basement and make sure it's less than 20 metres. And then you'll see, if you read through, how you can have just one exit from that level. So again, we'll skip through this, but then you've got to check the size of your exit. So again, this is all in section D, and pretty straightforward. Unless it's a certain type of building or a place of public entertainment, something like that, generally it's a metre, but it does get wider with those larger buildings which have more occupants. But again, that's usually for a different class of building. Goings and rises, I'm sure you're all used to looking at this. Going to check the 2R plus G. Your stairs should all be okay, but still have to check that. And I'm sure you all know the minimum and maximum rising and going. But it's all there for you as well. Oh yeah, and so I've just added this one because, yeah, this is a fun little thing. As I was mentioning, the garbage room. This is a pretty major oversight, I think, actually, in the design. So, of course, with the garbage bins on the basement level, there needs to be a way of getting those onto the street on garbage day, and with the car park ramp as the only way of doing that, that won't comply because it's not a pedestrian accessible ramp, because that slope is, I'm sure, 1 in 4, and that wouldn't comply. You could try to make the whole thing 1 in 8, and I think it would probably fit, but then you would need to make it wider so that it's got space for pedestrians as well as the cars, and that might take up too much room. So that might not be the best option. I think maybe a simpler option is to move the garbage room over to here at the top of the stairs. So that way people will have to go out of there, down through their stairs, through the car park, out this door and up the stairs, but that's no worse than in a lot of unit buildings. In fact, one I did down Des Moines, they've got to work a lot further than that, because it's all sloping sites, huge buildings down there, and they walk, a couple hundred metres every time they've got to take their rubbish out. So that's what you have to do. So if you can come up with another solution, that's fine, of course, but yeah, you need to have a pedestrian accessible way of getting those bins to the street. And so here I've just put in the requirements. If you do want to put in a pedestrian accessible ramp, then the requirement is 1 in 8. And that's something I'm always amazed. A lot of people miss that because you probably get used to just always doing an accessible ramp when you're doing a ramp, and they're 1 in 14. Yeah, but if it's not accessible, then yeah, you can do 1 in 8. And then we've got all the requirements for barriers, generally anything a metre above the level below, or the floor below, needs to have a metre high balustrade, and once it goes to 4 metres above, I'll just go on the next page. So if it's 4 metres above the surface below, then you can't have any gaps more than, well, you can't have gaps more than 125 anyway, but once you go over the 4 metres, and let's see if they changed this on me. I'm just doing this from memory. I'm sure it's still 4 metres though. I'm not going to the next page. You can't have handrails that you can possibly climb. Now, you're probably not going to have any 4 metre falls, but if you do, you need to make sure you've got some sort of balustrade like this, which can't be climbed as a ladder. That's something sometimes catches people out. But again, otherwise it's usually just the 125 gap that you need to make sure is the maximum in your balustrades, and then also, oh yeah, well actually we'll point out a couple of other changes, because if you've used to looking at the old BCA or the old NCC, you might be used to not having the requirement for a handrail. That's a new thing that came in, I think, in 2016. So you're now required to have a handrail on at least one side of your stair. For no, it has to be a handrail. There are requirements for the size and the distance from the wall. So it's about 40 mil, I think, something like that, and then I think 50 mil from the wall. I'd have to check it's all in the standard. But yeah, so it is a requirement now that it is a proper handrail on at least one side of your stair. And that wasn't a requirement before. Before 2016, you didn't need a handrail, but it is a requirement now. It's only if it's a metre above. If the stair is less than a metre, you don't need a handrail. But if it's once it's over a metre, you need it. And yeah, so on one side only though. You can do it on both sides if you want to, but only required on one side. And for the full length when it's required. Unless it's associated with a barrier, and then you can terminate. And that's how you can get those balustrades to stop still a metre before the floor. So then you've got the other one that always catches people out, this allowance for an 865 height above your stairs. I'm not a huge fan of that personally, because it means you can have quite low handrails or balustrades at certain points alongside your stair, and it's really for the transitions. Because if you draw some up, you'll see how it works. Basically, when you go from a stair to a landing, from a certain point on your step, if you measure it, the height's going to be lower because it's sloping. So it depends where you measure the step, but this is allowing for the fact that you maybe wouldn't necessarily want to be measuring from the toe of the step, the front of the step. So they've got that allowance to have an 865 vertical rise from the nosing of the stair. Yeah, it is actually, but it's a practical thing as well. It's because of the way handrails or balustrades and stairs work together. Well, I can show you in the previous diagram. Yeah, here, it shows you here. It's because of that. Right, so you can see that transition. So they've just projected the angle of that balustrade, but then when it connects to this 1 metre high landing, it's lower at that point. So it's because here, the part where you're stepping would still be close to a metre. Right, so it's just from the nosing that it's 865. Or that can be 865. I actually agree. I think it should be a metre from the nosing, personally, because it results in balustrades that feel quite low. And that one where the poor kid died in QBB, it complied. Yeah. Yeah, but this is the rule. Yeah, this is what the people who decide these things decide. And that's the requirement. So, yeah, but if you want to make it a metre, and a lot of people do, they just make it a metre from the nosing. Over a metre, yeah. So it'd be a bit higher. Yeah. So maybe it's a comfort thing as well, but again, it feels low to me. I've seen these stairs when you've got a big void in the middle, especially with fire stairs. It's really quite dangerous if they're low. And what more and more people are doing actually is walling off the whole void completely, and just putting brickwork all around, so you just can't fall down through the inside of a stairwell, especially in a fire, when you might have visibility limited. So then, okay, so that's it for section D, but it's an important one, so you've got to make sure you're comfortable with all the requirements in section D, and that is probably the most important one for you to use day to day when you're designing, and of course when you're documenting. And then section F. So with section F, you've got the basic requirements. I'm sure you're all familiar with the minimum ceiling height, 2.1 generally, but then 2.4 for habitable rooms. But remember, you have the medium density housing code, which gives the additional requirement of 2.7 for levels with living rooms. You can go down to 2.4 with levels that only have bedrooms. But any space, and your buildings have living spaces on both levels, if you've got it similar to the plan I've done here, okay, where there are these living rooms, even though they're small, they're classed as living rooms, so it really should be 2.7, both stories, to fit with the medium density housing code, and you've got so much room, you can do that easily in this building. So, again though, according to BCA, 2.4 is the minimum. And then with sloping ceilings, you can go lower. You can even go lower than what it says here in reality. You can argue it, but that's the basic requirement. The 2.2 for 2/3. Yeah, if you've got living rooms, to comply with the medium density housing code, yeah. Not the BCA, but yeah, just that one. So one of the other important requirements you've got to check is requirements for natural light and ventilation. That basically means that you need to have 10% of the floor space of any habitable room as an opening that lets in natural light. It can be borrowed light, so from another room, but again, it still needs to add up to 10%. And then for ventilation, it's 5%. So is it clear how you work that out? Yeah? No? Okay, so let's have a look. So, okay, so if we've got a bedroom here, it's 20 metres. So we need 2 square metres of window area. So we've easily got that. You can see there already, those windows would easily give you 2 square metres of natural light. In total. Yeah, each habitable room, yeah. So the bathroom, that's not a habitable room, but the living room would be. So with this one. So, okay, this is a good example. So let's pretend that bedroom there didn't have this door here. Let's say that wasn't glazed. And here I haven't obviously fixed that window up, but the window there, let's say it stops at the wall there. So it should be 1.8 square metres of window, and if this window, again, was stopping, if that wall was going through and it stopped there, we probably wouldn't get 1.8 metres. But you can have borrowed light, so if we had some sort of opening there with the road, and there was light coming through from this window through the road into the bedroom, you can add up those together, and in total they just need to be 10%. And so that's how they have, you know, those units where you have bedrooms that don't have any windows. Have you seen those? Where like half the units around this area would be like this. Yeah, I'd say almost half of the units in this vicinity where we are would have where they've got just like the ones I know next to the building over here, definitely like this. So they've just got a wall of glass at the front where the living spaces are, and then I'll show you some. And so yeah, and so the light will come from usually above the kitchen or something like that. They'll have it open above, yeah, and then borrowed light will come in above. You don't need to, no. Oh yeah, you can, yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. So you can do it in different ways, and it's the same with ventilation. But ventilation, it's only 5%. So here again, if it's 2 square metres of window, for natural light we need half of that. In other words, 1 square metre that's openable. And that's a great thing, because then you can't get people doing what they've done here and making these windows unopenable, which I think is criminal, really. But it's to say stop people jumping out or something, I don't know why. But we used to be able to open those windows. It was actually pretty good, even though there's a lot of cars out there. It was nice to get some air occasionally. So yes, so for habitable rooms in class 2, that's a requirement. Then you have what else have we got there? Well, that's natural light. Now, just watch out, if you're doing something in the city, they've now, and I think a lot of councils are bringing this in, they've got a requirement that you can only open them a certain amount, even though the window needs to be able to open, be built to open 50%. You've then got to put a lock on them so they can only open 10 centimetres or something like that for child safe.
Yeah.
But that can be unlockable. But that's a requirement that you have that lock. Yeah. Oh, you can't take them off. You've got to keep the lock on, but you can unlock it. Yeah. If you take them off, you're breaking the law. Yeah, it's a legal requirement that you have the lock. Yeah. Yeah. So. Oh yeah, so this tells you the distance from the boundary. We won't worry too much about that. That's for measuring, again, natural light, but that's actually pretty flexible, that one. And, oh yeah, so sound, we'll get onto that. So the other thing, apart from fire separation, one of the new requirements as well is this requirement for, well, the additional requirements for noise minimisation. And so you've got these two things, and look, I used to think I was good with insulation formulas and things like that, but this one I really struggle to understand, that CTR value. I do have an idea what it means, but it's not the easiest one. The tricky part there is that it's a negative value. So I'll show you in a second how you can apply it. Sorry. So here tells you what the requirements are. And so essentially you've got the R value, which is just a, essentially that's an insulation value. And then you've got the C value, which is some sort of transmission value, just for sound. And I think it's for low frequency sound, essentially. And again, leave this to the sound engineers, the acoustic engineers who do this for a living. All you need to know is the value that you've got to achieve. And I'll show you again how you can work that out. So that's it for the summary. So to finish off, all we need to do is look at the, again, document that I showed you earlier. So you can see here, these are all party walls, essentially. And it shows you there the R, W plus CTR values. So again, I mean, if you want to read up on it and try to understand it, it's not a bad thing, but really all you need to know is the value you need to achieve, which is basically going to be 50, and then pick a wall type that meets that requirement. Again, it's a good thing. I mean, I lived in a unit building years ago, and the sound, even it was a new one, but the sound was shocking coming from the other units. And so, no, it's awful. Yeah, that's right. Especially when you know them, and then you're friends with them, and then you suddenly hear stuff you don't want to hear. So, yeah, I know, it's awful. Yeah. So, so again, these new wall types, well, they're not new, but they're more than used to be required for party walls. So you could do a party wall before these noise requirements came in that was about 160. You could do a fire brick, or essentially a 140 brick with plasterboard both sides, and that met the FRL requirements. And that was a simple way of doing a party wall. You can't do that anymore. So this one here, that's about the closest you'll get to that, with concrete block, with again sound check or something for both sides. But you're much better off choosing one of these that has a frame separates the solid wall material in the middle from the acoustic lining, which again is generally going to be sound check or something like that. I know they say here 13 mil, but look up the CSR catalogue. Well, I always say CSR because that's what I use. Boral is similar, but I just like CSR. And so they have a product called Soundcheck, which is probably preferred to just standard 13 mil. And again, have a look at their catalogue and they'll have a whole range of systems that meet these requirements. And again, if you want to read more on this, I think George put this together. He did even give a bit of an explanation of what those things mean. So if you want to read through there, he'll probably explain it. There we are. What it all means. Again, you get this, you know, RW plus CPR minus CPR. Who knows why we do that? It doesn't matter if you don't need to know. But again, you just need to know what the value is, and that all comes from the BCA, and then you look up the table for the different wall types and specify that. Oh, and then, yeah, and so also should have mentioned as well. So you can definitely look at that. It's not a requirement because that'll be just within your units, but it's a nice thing to have the acoustic treatment to your floors as well. So again, you can read that to your heart's content and get a better understanding of it, but otherwise that should be all you need to know, I think. Oops, sorry. Okay, so that document's there on the P drive, and hopefully that covers. Yeah. No, it's no super question. No, that's still recording. Yeah, no, we'll put the. Yeah, it's good to have the questions in there.
No, I just want to know if there's an empty document for that. Is there a standard BCA document?
Yeah, the BCA report, the one I've given you. So.
Yeah, that's got all that text in it.
Yeah, well, you can delete the text if you want to, and then type in what you like.
Just have a standard, an empty copy?
Well, no, but you can just go and delete the yellow stuff if you want to.
You don't have to put the standard. Look up with that one.
Oh yeah, that one, is that empty, is it? Yeah, okay, if you want to, yeah, get that. Yeah, yeah. 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 But it's not about, I mean, having the text there, I thought helps you.
Oh, no,
because,
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Just for my business documents.
Oh, right, right. Yeah. 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 There's no right or wrong. I mean, anyone who does this for a living, they would just make their own table and read up the BCA and type in what they want. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so do that. Yep. Okay, so yeah, so that should be it. Unless you've got any other questions, but hopefully it's just one of those things where you've got to work through the process.